So you want to read a scientific article. Great. So let's figure out how to do that because that can be a little bit scary. Here's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to go over our agenda today. We're going to, have a little icebreaker. So maybe we're not actually. We're going to talk about what's a scientific article. We're going to do how not to read a scientific article. We're going to do a step-by-step how to read in my personal ways and preferences. And we're finally going to have some final tips and takeaways. So bear in mind, this is my opinion on how to read scientific articles, and we're really only going to be mainly focusing on research articles and literature reviews, not so much on different types of scientific different types of manuscripts that we're going to go into now. So, what is a scientific article? Well, scientific articles are generally the main ways in which researchers in all different types of fields, all different types of academics, really communicate with each other. They generally represent a singular research project and maybe even a singular portion of the research project, which shows something that was interesting in that moment and something that we're really going to be working on, wanting to share out as a significant finding. Some people do articles that are, multiple sections. Maybe they have a mixed method study that has a qualitative piece and a quantitative piece, and they merge it all into one thing. Some people, well, I've seen some articles where it's like, oh, well, we did three studies and we're going to put them all into this one paper. And other people, like me, prefer to have a singular article which for each aim, so if I do a quantitative study, if I do a mixed method study, so if I do quantitative research, I put that into a paper. If I do a qualitative research, I put that into a paper. And then if I find more stuff later, I'll put those into their own papers as well. So that's the main thing there. They get across a single point and they contribute to the science in some kind of way that's significant that either validates past research, questions past research, or moves things forward in some sense, whether it's a population or anything there. And there's all different types of articles. There's research articles. Research articles are your general way in which you think most things here. So this example of a research article right here. So exploring genetic counselors' experiences with indigenous patient populations. This is a survey, so a quantitative with study with additional, qualitative aspects because there's typing in there. And that is a research article because you're finding unique findings. You built the study, you got the IRB approved, everything like that. And that's where you're going with that. You have reviews. So reviews are amazingly important sets of research where our scientists usually, in some case, whether it's, some people specialize as review people, other people, they do this before they do any other studies. They try and see what all is out there before they go into their research, and they do this to get some evidence, and they say, okay, what's going on in like this specific field, and then you move on. So things like that. You have commentaries. Commentaries are kind of the opinions, but not so much opinions, but they're, ways to be like, hey, this is drawing attention to an issue where they don't necessarily have a paper or study yet, but they're like, these are big issues that we think that need to be explored in terms of this one theme, and then they move on. Editorials, similar but shorter. All this is policy briefs, which generally talk about, the political aspect of research and how you can improve things, whether it's through new laws or, updated regimes for IRBs or anything like that. Then you have protocols. Protocols are putting out you can register them or you can submit them to journals. And those are just a paper that tells you what this study is going to be like. And it shows you kind of like the organization, the routine, everything like that. So you know what's going to happen. And all this stuff is always cited, heavily cited, just like every other scientific paper. So they are different, but at the background, at the backbone, they are all very similar in terms of they're all evidence-based, and it just depends on what they're trying to get across. So, like I said, for us, we're going to focus on these two for today. So, this is how you might look if you're trying to read a research paper right now. You don't really understand what's going on. It's a lot of jargon, and it's not going to be great. So, what you don't want to do is you don't want to do a very common misconception, which I have always gotten from a lot of people. And that is people think that research articles are books or newspapers or any other type of thing that you might see. Or like, like a YouTube documentary or something where, it's an audiobook where you listen to it from the first page to the last page and you just read it straight. That is not what you're supposed to do with a research paper, especially when you're starting out. I mean, some people do that. Props to them. it's going to take you forever. And the same thing here with their abstract. Don't read the abstracts. Abstracts are always the last thing written by a researcher. Um, not always, but for the most part, if they're doing their job well, abstracts are always the last thing written, and they usually cut out a ton of stuff because they're not as well thought out as other things. So those are the things you don't want to do. So if you're not supposed to read an article front to back, in my opinion, how are you supposed to read it? So the first step, and we're going to use the article that I was talking about with genetic counselors to give you kind of this example. So the first thing you want to do with the article is you want to open it up and you want to look at the introduction. And you want to look at two very specific parts of the introduction. First, you want to look at the first paragraph. So the first paragraph will tell you what is going on with the research. You want to understand that real quick. That's going to give you a very, very broad overview of the state of the literature, and it's going to give you, okay, this is what they were doing. Then you want to skip all the way to the last paragraph of the introduction, wherever that is, because everybody basically fits everything that's going to go down in the actual article. They're going to tell you in this last paragraph of the introduction. You want to skip everything else. Just skip it for now. We're just trying to get an understanding of what this paper is even about. So, first paragraph, you get the sense of the literature, and last paragraph, they get an idea of what they're about to do in the research. Now, the second step, skim results. Literally just skim the results. You want to look at the headings, you want to look at the figures, and you want to just look at everything else that's very, very, very appealing. If it is highlighted, if it's bolded, if it's in an image, look at it because those are the things that the authors think are the most significant and interesting findings. Don't read about the methods yet. Don't read about any of that yet because you just want to know what did the authors think was worth reporting on. You don't really care how they found it out yet. You just want to see what they thought it was. So now that you have a little bit of an idea of how that works, now we're going to go into the discussion section. And the discussion section, it's very, very clear here. You just go to the first paragraph of the discussion section. And the first paragraph is where you usually find the most relevant findings. That is what because we go by sections here. So this is basically like the conclusion. It's, the buildup of a novel. You usually go, you build, you have your peak, and then you have your conclusions. You wind it down. The first paragraph of the discussion is almost always that peak within a scientific article, whether it's a review or a scientific article, not the other ones. But this is where they're going to tell you what their main takeaways are, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. This is what they were really trying to set out to find, and this is what they concluded. Then, after you read that, you go over to the conclusion because the conclusions are usually extraordinarily brief and they tell you what happened and what they hope to see going forward. So, now you've read the paper for a very first time. Great. So you actually have an idea of what's going on. Now let's go back to the intro. You want to reread the intro and now you want to read the entire introduction because now you're going to be able to understand what's going on. So now you're going to see how each of the articles, how the introduction really shows up, explores the state of the literature, and then talks about all the variables in play, and then tells you what's going on at the very end. And so we have all different types of things. So it has the dependent variables, covariates, and other types of things. Maybe they're going to discuss the methodologies, everything there, the theoretical frameworks. Just briefly mention it there. So you get a firm understanding. And if you would have done this at the very beginning, it would have taken a long time. It would have been a ton of information where you don't really know where it's headed. But now you know exactly what's going to be used in the study. So now this is going to make a lot more sense for you. And finally, in step 6, you want to read the full article. So you should be good. So after you read that introduction again, read through the article because now you're going to have a firm understanding of what's going on. If you're really interested, you can read it now. You can look at the methods. You'll be able to understand the results a lot better. And it's just lovely. So you want to just, keep track. You want to keep track of your main 4 points from the takeaways there. And you want to see how the authors hypothesize about their findings, what their results say, and how the authors interpret the results in the discussion. And you want to ask yourself a few, important questions. So the first thing is that if you see the results, do they match what the authors are saying in the discussion, or do you have counter, or you have other ideas? You also want to point out, okay, this is a great article. It was accepted for publication, and usually that means pretty good. But are there any other issues that you find with the article? And usually there's a limitation section, but is there anything else that you think is nagging on you? And then also, because you don't want to always be negative, everybody who is in research knows it's very, very difficult. It's very hard. You put a lot of love, a lot of labor into every single article. So, what are some positives? What are some things they did well that you could use for your own writing? And finally, any other questions that you might have? You want to think about it. And the sixth step is actually reviewing the references. So references are huge. So let's say that you're trying to do a brief review for a college paper that you're writing. So, and you see a really great piece of information said by an introduction of this paper. What you want to do is you don't want to take the you don't want to quote cite the paper that you're looking at that has the information in the introduction or the discussion. What you want to do is you want to go down to the references. You want to see where this article was saying it. You want to pull that one up and you want to verify what was said is true there. And then you cite that article in your paper. So that's how you kind of build it out. So that's why science is built, on the shoulders of giants and the shoulders of everybody else. We're always building off each other because every single article, we all cite each other, and that's how we build our stuff up, show validity. It's just like, hey, I didn't just say this, we've seen other science and it does this as well. And it's just lovely. So you want to see where that is going, you want to see where the citers work, and then if you're building posters, if you're building scientific papers, this will really help you because you always want to be citing your work in science. You always want to back up a statement of fact with a citation because it just shows what you're doing. And so these are my final tips and takeaways. You want to print out the articles. Personally, I read articles a lot on my Kindle Scribe. It is kind of hard to go back and forth on it, but it is possible and I don't mind it. It's much easier when you're just learning how to do this to start off by printing off the articles. But if you can't, you can do it online in Kindle. It's just as good. You also want to write out your 5 Ws. They're very important for this. And if you're trying to get key takeaways and build out an annotated bibliography, this is important. So the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. If you can answer all of those at the end of these 6 steps, you got it. And then you want to think about how these findings relate to your own instance. So reading articles is meant to stay current on the research. You are building out. This is how all scientists get better and become experts in their own field of study is simply by reading articles. So I'm trying to give you a way to cut down an article, say it takes normally 30 minutes to an hour to read. Now I'm telling to give you some information to try and cut that down to like 5 minutes or so, because you don't always have to read every single article you see, but you want to understand what it's really trying to say. And if you're going to use it for a review or including your citations, yeah, you want to read through the whole thing, but you don't always have to because not everything is relevant. And this is how you kind of cut through and see, is it really? And finally, you want to look to the citations and validate. Articles are interesting, but they're not definitive. And what I mean there is that basically, there's a ton of research out there and a ton of interesting findings. So you want to always make sure that is this is this profound? Is this something that I can use for a huge claim? Or is it just something that's significant because it's an outlier? You never want to take too much from a single paper. You always want to be careful and respectful and understand what's going on later. But that's really all I have. So I hope this is helpful for you. And yeah, this is how I read papers. So, I hope this is helpful. I hope you can find some more information for it. But yeah, that's it.